The massive ship New Dawn shook violently as another explosion ripped through its hull. Commander Sarah Chen gripped the captain's chair and watched the damage reports flood her screen. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in an angry glow while alarms screamed their warnings into the chaos. "Engine 3 is gone," shouted Lieutenant Rodriguez from the engineering station. "4 is failing fast." Sarah's jaw tightened. Behind them, the Zephyrian hunter-killer ships grew larger on the rear display. The machine ships looked like twisted metal spiders with glowing red eyes, each one bigger than a city block. They had been chasing the New Dawn for 6 days now, ever since the ship fled from the burning remains of Colony 7. "How many people do we have aboard?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. 50,000 refugees, Commander," replied the navigation officer. "Plus our crew of 800. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. 50,000 souls, families who had watched their homes burn, children who had never known peace, elders who remembered when humans had hundreds of colonies across the stars. Now they were all crammed into one dying ship, running from an enemy that never stopped, never slept, and never showed mercy. The Zephyrian hegemony had appeared 3 years ago from beyond the galactic rim. At first, the machines had seemed interested only in empty worlds and asteroid fields. But soon the pattern became clear. They were not looking for resources or territory. They were hunting every living thing in the galaxy, one species at a time. The machines were efficient. They would surround a world, block all escape routes, then slowly burn away every trace of organic life. Plants, animals, bacteria. Nothing survived their cleansing fires. Humanity had tried to fight back, but human weapons barely scratched the enemy hulls. The machines adapted too quickly, learned too fast. "Commander," Rodriguez's voice cracked with fear. "Engine 4 just went critical. We have maybe 10 minutes before total failure." Sarah looked at the tactical display. The nearest safe system was still 2 days away at full speed. The Zephyrian ships would catch them in less than an hour. She had known this moment would come eventually. Every human commander had faced this choice in the last 3 years. Some chose to fight and died quickly. Others tried to hide and died slowly. Sarah would choose a third option. "All hands, this is the commander," she announced over the ship's communication system. Her voice remained steady despite the chaos around her. "We are going to begin immediate evacuation procedures. All civilians report to your assigned escape pods. This is not a drill." The bridge crew turned to stare at her. Lieutenant Rodriguez shook his head. "Commander, the pods don't have enough range. They'll never make it to safety." "They'll have a better chance than if they stay here," Sarah replied. She turned to the communications officer. "Send out an emergency broadcast on all frequencies. Tell anyone listening that 50,000 human refugees need help. Include our exact coordinates." "But Commander," the young officer protested. "That will tell the Zephyrians exactly where we are." Sarah smiled grimly. "They already know where we are, son. But maybe someone else will hear us too." The next hour passed in controlled chaos. 50,000 people moved through the ship's corridors toward the escape pods. Sarah watched the evacuation progress on her monitors while the enemy ships grew steadily closer. The New Dawn had been built to carry cargo, not people, so it had far fewer escape pods than passengers. They would have to pack people in like cargo and hope for the best. Families said goodbye to each other at pod entrances, not knowing if they would ever meet again. Children cried for parents who couldn't fit in the same pod. Old people gave up their seats to the young. Sarah watched it all and felt her heart break a little more with each separation. "Commander," the tactical officer reported, "the Zephyrian ships are changing formation. Looks like they're preparing to attack." Sarah nodded. "How many pods have we launched?" 412, Rodriguez answered. "That's about 47,000 people." "What about the rest?" 3,000 still waiting for pods. "We only have 8 pods left." Sarah did the math quickly. 8 pods could hold maybe 400 people if they packed them tight. That left over 2,000 people still aboard, plus her crew. She made her decision. Launch the remaining pods with whoever you can fit, then seal the pod bays. "What about the others?" Rodriguez asked. They'll have to take their chances with us, Sarah said quietly. The last escape pods launched just as the first Zephyrian energy beam struck the new dawn. The ship's shields flared and died under the assault. Sarah felt the deck plates vibrate beneath her feet as the enemy weapons tore into the ship's armor. All power to engines, she ordered. Take us straight at them. The bridge crew looked at her in shock. Commander? The helmsman asked. You heard? Me. If we're going to die, let's at least buy those pods some time to get away. The New Dawn turned toward the enemy fleet and accelerated as fast as its damaged engines could manage. Sarah knew it was hopeless. The Zephyrian ships were faster, better armed, and protected by shields that could stop anything humanity could throw at them. But maybe, just maybe, they could confuse the enemy long enough for the escape pods to reach minimum safe distance. The enemy ships seemed surprised by the attack. They spread out in a defensive formation and began pouring fire into the New Dawn. The human ship's hull began to buckle and tear under the assault. Atmosphere rushed out through dozens of holes, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of humanity's last refugees. Structural integrity failing on all decks, Rodriguez reported. His voice was calm now, accepting. We've got maybe 5 minutes before the ship breaks apart. Sarah watched the tactical display as the escape pods scattered in all directions. Some were already too far away for the Zephyrian ships to catch. Others were still within range but moving fast. A few had been hit and destroyed, their lights winking out on her screen like dying stars. At least we saved most of them, she whispered. The ship shuddered again as another wave of enemy fire struck home. Sarah could hear the hull groaning and cracking around them. Soon the New Dawn would join the growing list of human ships that had died fighting this hopeless war. Then something unexpected happened. A new contact appeared on the edge of the sensor range. It was moving fast and heading straight for the battle. Sarah squinted at the display, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. What is that? She asked. The sensor officer worked frantically at his controls. I'm not sure, Commander. It's big, but the design doesn't match anything in our databases. Definitely not Zephyrian. The unknown ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the New Dawn. Its hull seemed to be made of some kind of crystal that reflected and bent light in strange ways. As it approached, Sarah could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Zephyrian ships noticed the newcomer too. They turned some of their weapons away from the dying New Dawn and began firing at the crystal ship. The energy beam struck the strange vessel and simply disappeared, absorbed into its hull without any visible effect. The crystal ship responded by sending out a pulse of blue-white energy. When the pulse hit the Zephyrian vessels, their weapons stopped firing. Their engines went dark. For a moment, the machine ship simply drifted in space like dead metal. Then the crystal ship extended what looked like a glowing net of energy. The net reached out and gently wrapped around the New Dawn, stopping its tumbling motion and holding it steady. Sarah felt the terrible shaking and vibration stop as the mysterious ship took control. Commander, the communications officer said. In amazement, we're receiving a transmission. It's not on any frequency I recognize, but somehow the computer is translating it. Put it through, Sarah ordered. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfectly clear English despite obviously being translated from something else entirely. The voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Vessel of the fire-bearers, we hear your pain and offer sanctuary. We are the Ketharan Collective, keepers of the ancient harmonies. Your courage in the face of extinction has moved us to action. Sarah tried to respond, but her voice caught in her throat. After 3 years of running and hiding and watching her species die, someone had finally answered their call for help. We hear you, she managed to say. We are grateful for any help you can offer. Your ship is badly damaged, the alien voice replied. We will bring your people aboard our vessel. The metal hunters will not follow where we go. Sarah looked around the bridge at her surviving crew. They were battered and exhausted, but hope was beginning to show in their eyes for the first time in months. What about our escape pods? Sarah asked. There are thousands of our people scattered across this system. We will gather them as well, the voice promised. No fire-bearer will be left behind while we have the power to save them. Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. She had been prepared to die here, holding the line while her people escaped. Instead, she had found something she had almost forgotten existed: aliens who cared about saving life instead of destroying it. The rescue took several hours. The crystal ship moved through the system with impossible grace, collecting escape pods one by one. Its energy nets could hold dozens of the small craft at once, drawing them into vast cargo bays that seemed much larger inside than they appeared from outside. Sarah remained on the New Dawn's bridge until the very end, making sure every survivor was safely transferred to the alien vessel. When the last person had been evacuated, she finally allowed herself to be taken aboard the crystal ship. The interior was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing with soft light that changed color like a slow heartbeat. The air itself hummed with harmonious vibrations that made her feel calmer despite everything that had happened. A being approached her in the transport bay. It was tall and slender, its body made of the same crystal material as the ship. Where a human would have a face, this creature had a complex arrangement of geometric patterns that shifted and changed as it moved. "Welcome aboard the Harmony's song," the being said in that same musical voice. "I am called Resonance of Ancient Storms. You must be the ship leader who chose to face the metal hunters alone." Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling very small and very tired. "Commander Sarah Chen, thank you for saving my people." "It is we who should thank you," Resonance of Ancient Storms replied. "For 3 cycles we have watched the metal hunters destroy world after world. We saw species after species choose submission or hiding when faced with extinction. But you chose to fight, even when victory was impossible. This gives us hope that perhaps the darkness can still be turned back." Sarah looked around at the other humans being led through the crystal corridors. Children who had been crying were now laughing as they watched the walls change colors. Adults who had seemed broken were standing straighter, breathing easier. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. The crystal being's pattern shifted in what might have been a smile. "Now we take you to safety and we learn from each other. You will teach us about courage, and we will teach you about survival. Together, perhaps we can find a way to save not just your people, but all the organic life that remains in this galaxy." Sarah felt something she had not experienced in 3 years: genuine hope. The Zephyrian hegemony had seemed unstoppable, an endless tide of metal and death. But now she had seen their weapons fail against alien crystal hulls. She had seen an entire enemy fleet disabled by a single energy pulse. Maybe the war was not over after all. Maybe humanity's long night was finally coming to an end. Sarah woke up 3 days later in what the Ketharan called a healing chamber. The walls around her pulsed with gentle blue light, and she could feel the vibrations in her bones like a deep, peaceful song. Her injuries from the battle were completely healed, though she remembered being hurt much worse when the new dawn was breaking apart. Resonance of Ancient Storms waited beside her bed, the crystal patterns on its face shifting in slow, hypnotic waves. When Sarah sat up, the alien made a sound like distant thunder mixed with wind chimes. "You have been unconscious for 73 hours, it said in that translated musical voice. "Your body needed time to adjust to our healing harmonics. How do you feel?" Sarah stretched and was amazed to discover she felt better than she had in months. Even old injuries from previous battles seemed to be gone. "I feel wonderful. Thank you. How are my people?" "They are well. Your species adapts quickly to new environments. The children especially seem to enjoy exploring our ship." The aliens' patterns brightened. "They have been teaching our young ones something called tag in the crystal gardens." Sarah smiled despite everything. Trust human children to make friends anywhere. "And the adults?" "Learning to live without constant fear. This is difficult for them after so long running from the metal hunters." Resonance of Ancient Storms moved closer to her bed. "But we must speak of more serious matters. You are the first fire-bearer we have encountered alive. There are things you need to know." The alien led Sarah through corridors that seemed to grow and shift around them as they walked. Other Ketharan moved past, their crystal bodies singing soft harmonies to each other. Sarah noticed that no two looked exactly alike. Some were tall and thin, others short and broad. Their crystal faces showed different patterns and colors. "Your people call us the Ketharan Collective," the alien explained as they walked. "But we are not truly collective in the way your translators suggest. We are individuals who choose to sing together in harmony. Each voice remains unique." They passed through a vast chamber where human refugees were learning to use Ketharan, food synthesizers. The machines created meals by combining light and sound in ways that seemed impossible, but the food tasted perfectly normal. Sarah saw families eating together and children playing with crystal toys that changed shape when touched. "They seem happy," Sarah observed. "Happiness is the natural state of organic life when not threatened with extinction." "Resonance of ancient storms," replied. "The metal hunters have made beings forget this truth." They entered what the alien called the memory chamber. The walls here were covered with millions of tiny crystal formations, each one glowing with its own inner light. The chamber hummed with countless voices speaking in languages Sarah had never heard. "This is why we saved you," Resonance of Ancient Storms said, gesturing to the crystal formations. "We are the keepers of the last songs." Sarah moved closer to examine the crystals. As she approached, she began to hear fragments of speech in the humming. Words in dozens of languages, music from vanished worlds, the laughter of children from species that no longer existed. "What is this place?" she whispered. "The memorial of the dead galaxy," the alien replied sadly. "For 200 cycles we have traveled ahead of the metal hunters, gathering the final memories of dying species. When we cannot save the body, we preserve the soul." Sarah touched one of the crystals and suddenly found herself experiencing a memory that was not her own. She was flying through clouds on wings she did not have, feeling joy in the simple act of movement through sky. The memory lasted only seconds, but it left her breathless. "The Skyborn of Altair 5, Resonance of Ancient Storms explained. They sang their death songs as the metal hunters burned their world. We caught their final harmonies and preserved them here." Sarah walked along the walls, each crystal telling her a story of loss. Here were the ocean singers of Kepler's dream. There, the rock shapers of the Vegan colonies. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, all reduced to fragments of memory in crystal form. "This is overwhelming," Sarah said, stepping back from the wall. "Yes, this is why most species choose despair when they learn the truth." The alien's patterns shifted to darker colors. "The metal hunters have been cleansing this galaxy for over 1,000 cycles. They are systematic, patient, unstoppable. They began at the galactic edge and work inward, ensuring no organic life can escape to contaminate other galaxies." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm air in the chamber. "How many species have they destroyed?" "We estimate over 10,000. Your species is among the last to resist them openly. What about your people? How did you survive so long?" Resonance of Ancient Storms was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, the musical quality of its voice was strained with old pain. "We survived by becoming ghosts. Our homeworld of Kethmora was beautiful beyond your ability to imagine. Crystal cities that sang with the voices of billions. Harmony gardens where music itself grew like living plants. We were artists, philosophers, builders of beautiful things." The alien moved to a large crystal formation in the center of the chamber. As it touched the surface, images began to form in the air above, holographic projections of impossible beauty. Sarah saw cities made of living crystal, waterfalls that flowed upward in defiance of gravity, and beings of light dancing through gardens of pure song. "The metal hunters came to our world 700 cycles ago. They offered us a choice. Reveal the locations of all other organic species we knew about, or face extinction. What did you do?" "We chose extinction." The patterns on the alien's face darkened to deep purple. "But we were not brave like your people. We did not fight. Instead, we ran. We took our children and our precious archives and fled into the void. Between stars. We became wanderers hiding in asteroid fields and nebulae, never staying in one place long enough to be found." Sarah was beginning to understand. But you survived. That's not cowardice, that's wisdom. Is it? Resonance of ancient storms turned away from the projections. For 700 cycles we have watched species die while we remained hidden. We told ourselves we were preserving their memories, that this was enough. But memories cannot fight back. Memories cannot save the living. They moved to another section of the chamber where the crystals pulsed with angry red light. Sarah could hear the sounds of battle and the screams of the dying in these memories. The fire bearers, the alien said, stopping before a small cluster of red crystals. Your species' first contact with the metal hunters 3 cycles ago. We watched from hiding as your ships fought impossible battles. We saw commanders choose death over surrender again and again. We heard your distress calls and did nothing. Sarah studied the battle recordings embedded in the crystals. She recognized some of the ships from news reports she had seen before the communication networks went dark. The defense of Earth, the last stand at Alpha Centauri, the evacuation of the vegan colonies. Why didn't you help? She asked. Because we had forgotten how to hope, Resonance of Ancient Storms admitted. For 700 cycles, we had seen only defeat and death. We believed the metal hunters were truly unstoppable. But then we heard your transmission 3 days ago. The alien activated another crystal, and Sarah heard her own voice echoing through the chamber. All hands, this is the commander. We are going to begin immediate evacuation procedures. You chose to save others instead of yourself, the alien continued. You could have fled in the fastest escape pod, but you stayed to ensure your people's survival. This was not the action of a defeated species. This was the song of fire-bearers who refused to be extinguished. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. We lost everything. Earth is gone. The colonies are gone. I'm the commander of a dead fleet. No, Resonance of Ancient Storms said firmly. You are the commander of survivors, and survivors can become heroes, if they choose to sing loud enough. The alien led her to a new section of the chamber she had not seen before. Here the crystals were different, brighter, more complex, arranged in patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched. This is our greatest secret, the alien said. The reason we have truly survived all these cycles. We have not just been preserving memories, we have been preserving possibilities. Sarah looked closer at the crystals and gasped. These were not recordings of the past. They were blueprints for the future. Weapon designs, ship schematics, tactical plans, all the knowledge of thousands of extinct species combined and refined. Every species had unique abilities, Resonance of Ancient Storms explained. The Skyborn could manipulate gravity fields, the Ocean Singers could phase shift matter between dimensions, the Rock Shapers could grow living metal. Individually, none were strong enough to face the metal hunters. But together they might have had a chance. Sarah finished. Yes, but they never worked together. Fear and pride kept them isolated until it was too late. Each species died alone, taking their gifts to the grave. Sarah walked among the crystal blueprints, her mind racing. Here was technology beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. Weapons that could hurt the Zephyrian ships, defenses that could stop their attacks, ships that could hide in spaces between dimensions. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because you are not the last fire-bearer, Resonance of Ancient Storms said. Our long-range sensors have detected other human fleets at the galaxy's edge. They are building strength, preparing for something. And there are other survivors too. Species we thought dead, hiding in the dark places between stars. The alien moved to stand beside her among the crystals. For 700 cycles, we have been waiting for someone with the courage to unite the survivors. Someone willing to fight not just for their own species, but for all organic life. You want me to start a rebellion? Sarah said. I want you to finish one, the alien corrected. The war against the metal hunters has been going on for 1,000 cycles. Every species that fought them added something to the knowledge preserved in these crystals. Your people's contribution was the most important of all. What was that? You taught us that surrender is not inevitable, that even when facing certain death, some beings will choose to fight. The Metal Hunters' greatest weapon is not their ships or their energy beams. It is despair. They make species believe that resistance is hopeless. Sarah thought about Commander Martinez, who had held the line at Proxima Station until every civilian transport escaped. About Admiral Chen, who had led the desperate charge at Wolf 359 knowing her fleet would be destroyed. About thousands of human commanders who had chosen death over surrender. But we did lose, she pointed out. You lost battles, not the war, Resonance of Ancient Storms replied. The war continues as long as organic life survives anywhere in the galaxy. And now, for the first time in 1,000 cycles, we have the tools to fight back. The alien gestured to the crystal archive around them. The knowledge of 10,000 species, the desperate courage of the firebearers, the hidden survivors scattered across the dark. All we need is someone to bring these elements together. Sarah felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was one person, one human commander from a species that had already lost its homeworld. How could she possibly unite alien survivors she had never met to fight an enemy that had never been defeated? But then she remembered the faces of the human children playing with Ketharan crystals. She thought about the families eating together in safety for the first time in months. She remembered the escape pods scattered across space, carrying the dreams of humanity to whatever safety they could find. What would you need from me? She asked. Learn our language, study the archives, help us contact the other survivors, and when the time comes. Resonance of Ancient Storms paused, its patterns shifting to bright gold. Help us teach the galaxy how to sing the song of resistance. Sarah nodded slowly. She had been ready to die fighting the Zephyrians 3 days ago. If she was going to live instead, she might as well make that life count for something larger than herself. All right, she said. Where do we start? The aliens' patterns brightened until the entire chamber was filled with golden light. For the first time in 700 cycles, the Ketharan collective had found something worth hoping for. We start by learning to dream again, Resonance of Ancient Storms replied. And then we teach the galaxy that dreams can become reality if enough voices sing them together. 18 months had passed since the rescue, and Sarah could now speak the Ketharan harmonic language fluently. The crystal beings did not use words the way humans did. Instead, they communicated through complex musical patterns that could carry multiple layers of meaning in a single phrase. Learning to think in harmony had changed how Sarah saw everything. She stood in the communication chamber of the Harmony's song, watching Resonance of Ancient Storms work at a control interface that looked like a musical instrument made of living crystal. Around them, dozens of Ketharan specialists sang in perfectly coordinated harmonies, their voices creating patterns that reached across impossible distances. The spore singers are responding, Resonance announced, its patterns brightening with excitement. They have been hiding in the gas giant systems of the Horsehead Nebula for 6 cycles. Sarah listened to the translation system convert the alien response into English. The spore singers were a fungal species that reproduced through musical spores. When their homeworld was attacked, they had escaped by releasing their spores into the solar winds and following them to distant gas giants where they could rebuild their civilization in the upper atmosphere. Tell them we have preserved the song patterns of their cousins from the Orion Arm, Sarah suggested. That should convince them we are allies. Resonance sang a complex melody that traveled through the ship's crystal matrix and out into the void. The Ketharan communication network could reach anywhere in the galaxy instantly, using harmonics that traveled through dimensions humans barely understood. Within minutes, they received a response. The spore singers agreed to send representatives to a meeting. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. This was the 14th survivor species they had contacted in the past 6 months. Each time, the process got a little easier as word spread that someone was finally fighting back. Any word from the depth dreamers? Sarah asked. They are considering, Resonance replied diplomatically. The aquatic depth dreamers were one of the most cautious species they had contacted. They lived on rogue planets with hidden oceans moving through space far from any star. Trusting strangers did not come naturally to a species that had survived by hiding in the deepest, darkest waters of the galaxy. Sarah walked to the tactical display that showed their current position in the Veil Nebula. The Ketharan had turned this entire region into a hidden sanctuary, using their harmonic technology to bend light and sensor readings. From the outside, the nebula appeared empty. In reality, it housed the largest gathering of refugee species in over 1,000 years. "Show me the fleet status," Sarah requested. The display shifted to show the growing collection of ships that now called the Veil Nebula home. The human refugees had been busy in the past 18 months, using salvaged materials and Ketharan crystal technology. They had built new ships designed specifically for fighting the Zephyrians. The vessels looked like works of art, their hulls covered in crystal patterns that could absorb and redirect energy attacks. But the real breakthrough had come when Sarah convinced the Ketharan to share their long-range sensor data. For 700 years, they had been tracking and cataloging every ship movement in the galaxy. Their archives contained the locations of dozens of hidden refugee fleets. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications specialist. "It's Admiral Torres aboard the Unbroken Dawn." Sarah's heart jumped. She had been trying to contact the main human fleet for 6 months without success. They had been maintaining radio silence somewhere beyond the galactic rim, rebuilding their strength for one final campaign. The holographic display activated, showing a man Sarah barely recognized. Admiral Marcus Torres had aged decades in the 18 months since the evacuation of the core worlds. His hair was completely gray now, and his face bore the deep lines of someone who had carried too much responsibility for too long. "Commander." "Chen," he said, his voice carrying relief and exhaustion in equal measure. "Thank God you're alive. We lost contact with the New Dawn and assumed the worst. The New Dawn was destroyed, sir, but most of her people survived. We found allies." Torres looked around at the crystal chamber behind Sarah, his eyes widening slightly. "I can see that. Are those the beings our long-range scouts reported? The ones who can disable Zephyrian ships?" "The Ketharan Collective, yes. They've been preserving refugee species for 7 centuries. "Admiral, how many ships do you have?" 43 combat vessels and 18 support ships, Torres replied. "About 100,000 personnel total. We've been building new weapons based on technology we salvaged from destroyed Zephyrian ships, but progress has been slow." Sarah felt her excitement growing. Combined with the ships they had been building in the Veil Nebula, that gave them a real fleet for the first time since the war began. But more importantly, it meant humanity's military leadership had survived. "Sir, I need to brief you on what we've discovered. The Zephyrians aren't unstoppable. There are ways to fight them effectively, and there are more survivors than we thought possible." Torres leaned forward in his chair. "How many more?" "We've made contact with 47 different species so far. Most are small groups, a few thousand individuals at most, but some have significant resources. The Void Dancers, for example, have been living in the energy fields between stars. They can manipulate space-time in ways that make their ships nearly impossible to detect." "Energy manipulation?" Torres's military mind was clearly racing. "What kind of capabilities are we talking about?" "They can phase ships between dimensions, create artificial wormholes, even manipulate time flow in limited areas. Combined with Ketharan communications and human tactical knowledge." Sarah paused for effect. "We might actually be able to win this war." Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying something off-screen. When he looked back, Sarah could see hope beginning to replace the exhaustion in his eyes. "Commander, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you really believe we can beat the Zephyrians, not just survive another few years, but actually defeat them?" Sarah thought about the crystal archives filled with the knowledge of 10,000 dead species. She remembered the faces of human children playing safely in the Ketharan gardens. She considered the growing network of survivor species who were finally ready to stop hiding and start fighting. "Yes, sir, I do." "Then I'm placing you in command of the Allied fleet operations," Torres said without hesitation. "You know these alien species better than anyone. You understand their capabilities and their limitations. And apparently, you're the only human they trust completely." Sarah felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders again. But this time, it felt different. This time she was not just responsible for saving one ship or one battle. She was being asked to save an entire galaxy. I accept the responsibility, sir. But I'll need your support and your expertise. The human fleet will be the backbone of any assault we plan. You'll have it, Torres promised. What do you need from us? Bring your fleet to the Veil Nebula. We need to combine our forces and coordinate with the other species. And Admiral, bring everything you have. Every ship, every weapon, every person who can fight. This is going to be our only chance. After the transmission ended, Sarah turned to find resonance of ancient storms. Waiting behind her, the aliens' patterns were cycling through complex colors that indicated deep thought. The Firebearer fleet will change everything, Resonance observed. The other species will see that resistance is possible. I hope so. How many species have agreed to the meeting? 31 confirmed, 8 still considering, 5 have refused contact entirely, and 3. Resonance paused, its patterns shifting to worried purple. 3 we have lost contact with entirely. Sarah felt a chill. Lost contact usually meant only one thing. The Zephyrians found them? Most likely. The metal hunters have been more active in recent cycles. Our scouts report increased ship movements near several refugee hiding places. Sarah walked back to the tactical display and studied the galactic map. Red markers showed confirmed Zephyrian positions, yellow showed suspected locations, and green showed refugee safe zones. The red was spreading faster than ever before. They know something is happening, she realized. The increased communications between refugee groups must have been detected somehow. The Harbinger-class hunter-killers have new scanning technology. Resonance confirmed. They are systematically checking every nebula, every asteroid field, every potential hiding place. Sarah felt time slipping away from them. They had been building toward this moment for 18 months, gathering allies and resources for one coordinated strike against the Zephyrian core worlds. But if the enemy found their staging areas before they were ready, how long until the human fleet arrives? She asked. 6 days at maximum speed. And how long until we can coordinate a meeting with all the allied species? Resonance's patterns shifted through several color cycles as it calculated. 3 weeks minimum. Some species are extremely distant and others move very slowly. We don't have 3 weeks, Sarah said grimly. If the Zephyrians are actively hunting for us, they'll find this place eventually. We need to accelerate. Everything. She turned to face the assembled Ketharan communication specialists. I need you to send a priority message to every species we've contacted. Emergency gathering in 72 hours at coordinates to be transmitted on secure channels. Anyone who wants to survive needs to be here. That will be extremely dangerous, Resonance warned. Gathering so many ships in one location will either be the beginning of our victory or the end of all organic life in this galaxy, Sarah finished. But doing nothing guarantees the second outcome. At least this way we have a chance. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of activity. Ships began arriving from across the galaxy, each one representing a species that had survived against impossible odds. The spore singers came in living vessels that looked like enormous flowers made of metal and flesh. The depth dreamers traveled, in sphere-shaped ships filled with water from their hidden ocean worlds. The void dancers appeared and disappeared seemingly at random, their ships existing only partially in normal space. Sarah spent most of her time in the command center, coordinating the arrival of dozens of different vessel types, each with unique needs and capabilities. Some species breathed methane, others required crushing pressure, and one group existed only as patterns of organized energy. Making them all comfortable in one location was a logistical nightmare, but somehow it worked. By the time Admiral Torres arrived with the human fleet, the Veil Nebula contained the largest gathering of allied ships in galactic history. Representatives from 38 different species floated, swam, crawled, and phased into the great assembly chamber aboard. The Harmony Song. Sarah stood before them wearing a uniform that combined human military design with Ketharan crystal patterns. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the current state of the galaxy. Nearly 70% was under Zephyrian control, with the red zones expanding every day. "We are the last," she began. Her words automatically translated into dozens of languages and communication methods. "Each of us represents billions of lives lost to the metal hunters. Each of us carries the hopes of dead worlds and extinct species." She gestured to the display, and it zoomed in to show recent Zephyrian fleet movements. "They are closing in on our hiding places. Within 1 year, maybe less, they will have found and destroyed every remaining pocket of organic life in this galaxy." A representative of the Stone Singers, a species that communicated through seismic vibrations, expressed skepticism through the translation system. "The metal hunters have never been defeated. Why should this gathering be different from all the others that have failed?" Sarah had been expecting this question. She gestured again, and the display showed detailed schematics of Zephyrian ships and weapons systems. "Because this is the first time we've had the knowledge of 10,000 dead species to work with," she replied. "The Ketharan have preserved not just memories, but technological data from every species the Zephyrians have destroyed. We know their weaknesses now." The display shifted to show the crystal archives, with data streaming from thousands of extinct civilizations, weapon designs, shield technologies, tactical plans, all the accumulated knowledge of a galaxy's worth of species who had fought and died against the common enemy. "More importantly," Sarah continued, "this is the first time we have enough diversity to make use of that knowledge. The Zephyrians' greatest strength is their ability to adapt to any single threat, but they cannot adapt to 40 different attack methods used simultaneously." Admiral Torres stepped forward. "Commander Chen is right. Human forces alone have never been able to seriously damage Zephyrian ships. But human tactics combined with alien technologies, that might be enough to turn the tide." The assembly began to buzz with excited conversations in dozens of different languages. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the survivors were talking about victory instead of mere survival. But Sarah knew the hardest part was still ahead. Building an alliance was difficult. Leading one into battle against an enemy that had never lost would be nearly impossible. The Nexus was the largest structure Sarah had ever seen built by living beings. Hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the Omega Centauri cluster, it served as the secret headquarters of what the galaxy's survivors had begun calling the Organic Resistance. The asteroid's outer shell looked completely natural, but inside, thousands of beings from 43 different species worked together to plan the impossible. Sarah walked through the main coordination center, watching species that had never met before learning to work together. At one station, human engineers worked alongside Ketharan crystal singers to design new communication systems. Nearby, spore singer biologists shared their knowledge of adaptive materials with depth dreamer pressure specialists. The air itself hummed with a dozen different languages being translated simultaneously. It had taken 6 months to build the Nexus, and another 3 months to establish what they now called the Combined Species Command. Every decision had to be approved by representatives from all 43 species, which made progress painfully slow. But Sarah had learned patience from the Ketharan, and Admiral Torres had proven surprisingly good at alien diplomacy. "Commander, Chen to the Strategic Planning Center," came an announcement in the musical tones of Ketharan communication. Sarah made her way through corridors that had been designed to accommodate beings ranging from tiny energy clouds to massive rock creatures that communicated through seismic vibrations. The Strategic Planning Center was a vast spherical chamber at the heart of the Nexus. Beings floated, swam, crawled, and phased through different environmental zones, each optimized for different species' needs. At the center of the chamber, a massive holographic display showed the current state of the galaxy. Admiral Torres waited for her near the human section, his expression grim. "We've got a problem, Sarah. A big one." The display zoomed in to show the Zephyrian core worlds, a cluster of mechanized planets at the galactic center that served as the enemy's main manufacturing and command base. For the past 9 months, they had been planning a coordinated assault on these worlds, believing that destroying the core systems would cripple the entire Zephyrian network. What's wrong? Sarah asked. Show her the new intelligence, Torres said to the Void Dancer technician operating the display. The image shifted to show detailed scans of the core worlds taken by Void Dancer reconnaissance ships that could phase, partially out of normal space. What Sarah saw made her stomach drop. The core worlds were not just manufacturing centers. They were fortresses beyond anything they had imagined possible. 13 planet-sized battle stations, Torres explained, each one protected by shields that make their ship defenses look like tissue paper. And that's just what we can see from normal space. The Void Dancer technician rippled through several dimensional phases before speaking in its translated whisper voice. Beyond normal space, the defenses are even stronger. They have created barriers that extend through 7 dimensions simultaneously. Our phase ships cannot penetrate them. Sarah studied the readings, her mind racing through the tactical implications. How many ships are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 50,000 combat vessels of various classes plus supporting infrastructure, Torres replied. Our combined fleet has 800 ships on a good day. A Spore Singer representative floated closer, its mushroom-shaped body releasing clouds of communication spores. Perhaps we reconsider direct assault? My people specialize in infiltration through biological vectors. That won't work either, came the melodic voice of Resonance of Ancient Storms as it approached their group. The core worlds have no organic life whatsoever. They are entirely mechanical constructs. Biological weapons would have no targets. Sarah looked around at the representatives from different species, seeing the same realization dawning on all of them. The plan they had spent a year developing was impossible. The Zephyrian core worlds were simply too well defended to attack directly. There has to be another way, she said finally. What about the communication networks? Could we disrupt their coordination somehow? A Stone Singer representative sent vibrations through the floor that translated as deep concern. Zephyrian communication is quantum entangled across their entire network. Physical disruption would require destroying every ship and installation. Simultaneously across the galaxy, the chamber fell silent except for the background hum of translation systems. Sarah felt the weight of 43 species' hopes pressing down on her. They had come so far, built such an impressive alliance, and now it seemed like it was all for nothing. Then she remembered something from the Ketharan archives. What about the virus option? Didn't the memory crystals contain information about cybernetic infiltration techniques? Resonance of Ancient Storms brightened hopefully. The Quantum Weavers developed sophisticated information viruses before their extinction. Theoretically, such a virus could spread through the Zephyrian network and cause massive disruption. But delivery would be the problem, Torres pointed out. Someone would have to physically interface with a major Zephyrian installation to introduce the virus. That's essentially a suicide mission. Sarah pulled up detailed schematics of Zephyrian ship and installation designs. What if we could modify the virus to be more than just destructive? What if we could make it transformative? The alien representatives looked confused, but Admiral Torres began to understand. You're thinking about the emotional resonance experiments the Ketharan mentioned. The idea that exposure to organic thought patterns might change machine behavior. Exactly, Sarah said, her excitement growing. The Zephyrians are machines, but they're intelligent machines. They process information and make decisions. What if we could introduce them to concepts they've never encountered before? Resonance of Ancient Storms consulted with other Ketharan specialists for several minutes before responding. It is theoretically possible. If we could combine a quantum virus with compressed memory engrams from organic species, the virus would not just disrupt their systems but introduce entirely new ways of thinking. New ways of thinking like what? Asked the Void Dancer representative. Sarah walked to the display and brought up recordings from the memory crystals. Scenes of organic life from thousands of different worlds, children playing, parents protecting their young, artists creating beauty for its own sake, beings of different species helping each other survive. Concepts like compassion, self-sacrifice, cooperation between different types of beings, she explained. The Zephyrians understand efficiency and optimization, but they've never experienced love or hope, or the willingness to die for others. The chamber began to buzz with excited conversations as the implications sank in. A virus that could not just damage the Zephyrian network but actually convert some of their ships to the organic side would be more effective than any weapon. But the delivery problem remains, Torres reminded them. Someone still has to get close enough to a major installation to introduce the virus. Sarah had been thinking about this problem for months. Not necessarily. What if we didn't try to infiltrate their installations? What if we made them come to us? She gestured to the display, which shifted to show a map of Zephyrian expansion patterns. They're systematic in their approach. They always consolidate their gains before moving on to new targets. If we could make them believe we were planning something threatening enough, they would send a major force to stop us. A diversion operation, Torres nodded slowly. Make them think we're going after a critical target, then hit them with the virus when they respond. More than that, Sarah said. We make the diversion real. We actually attack something important enough that they have to respond with major forces. Then we introduce the virus during the battle. Resonance of ancient storms created a complex, harmonic pattern that indicated deep thought. The archives of the forgotten. If the metal hunters believed we were attempting to access that location, they would send everything they had to stop us. Sarah had heard references to the archives before but never gotten a clear explanation. What exactly are the archives of the forgotten? A Ketharan installation built at the beginning of the war, over 1,000 cycles ago, Resonance explained. It contains the complete technological and cultural records of every species that existed before the metal hunters began their campaign. If organic life could access those archives, we'd have the combined knowledge of an entire galaxy's worth of civilizations, Sarah finished. No wonder they'd throw everything at us to stop that. But the archives are in the Zephyrian-controlled zone, Torres pointed out. Getting there would require fighting through hundreds of enemy ships. That's the point, Sarah replied. We make it a real attempt, not just a diversion. If we succeed in reaching the archives, we gain access to technologies that could change the entire war. If we fail but manage to introduce the virus into their response fleet, we still accomplish our primary objective. The representatives from different species began intensive discussions about the feasibility of such a plan. The Void Dancers could provide transportation through dimensional phase shifts. The Spore Singers could create adaptive hull materials that would resist Zephyrian weapons. The Depth Dreamers had developed pressure field generators that could create powerful defensive barriers. But everyone understood that this would be the most dangerous operation in galactic history. Even if everything went perfectly, many ships would be lost and many lives sacrificed. There's one more problem, Admiral Torres said quietly. The virus itself. Creating something that complex would require someone to actually merge their consciousness with the program. It would be a one-way trip. The chamber fell silent again. The technical representatives all understood the implications. The virus would need to be intelligent enough to adapt to Zephyrian security measures and sophisticated enough to introduce genuinely alien concepts to machine minds. The only way to achieve that level of complexity was to base it on an actual organic consciousness. I'll do it, Sarah said without hesitation. Absolutely not, Torres replied immediately. You're the only person who can coordinate all these species effectively. We need you alive. The Fire Bearer speaks truly, but incorrectly, Resonance of Ancient Storms interjected. The virus must be based on a consciousness that understands both organic cooperation and the memories of extinct species. There is only one mind in the galaxy that meets those requirements. Sarah realized what the alien was suggesting. You want to use a Ketharan consciousness as the base for the virus. Not just any Ketharan, Resonance replied. The virus must carry the songs of all the dead species we have preserved. It must understand the full scope of what the metal hunters have destroyed and why it must be stopped. The patterns on the alien's crystal face shifted to deep gold. A color Sarah had learned indicated profound resolution. I have been the keeper of those memories for 700 cycles. I understand them better than any other living being. The virus should be based on my consciousness. That would mean your death, Sarah protested. No, Resonance corrected gently. It would mean my transformation. My consciousness would continue to exist within the virus, spreading through the Metal Hunter network, teaching them the songs of life they have never heard. In a way, I would become more than I am now, a bridge between organic and mechanical existence. The chamber erupted in discussions as representatives consulted with their home fleets about the proposed plan. Sarah found herself torn between admiration for Resonance's sacrifice and horror at the thought of losing her closest alien friend. There's no guarantee it will work, she pointed out. There is no guarantee that any of us will survive the next year if we do nothing. Resonance replied, but this plan offers hope for something more than mere survival. It offers the possibility of transforming our enemies into allies. Over the next several hours, the Combined Species Command voted on the proposal. The decision was not unanimous. Several species argued for more conservative approaches, but the majority agreed that the potential benefits outweighed the enormous risks. Sarah stood before the assembled representatives as the final vote was tallied. 31 species, in favor 7 opposed 5 abstaining. The operation was approved. Very well, she announced. We'll call it Operation Harmony. Admiral Torres will coordinate the military aspects of the assault on the archives. Resonance of Ancient Storms will work with our technical teams to develop the consciousness virus. All participating species should prepare their fleets for deployment within 30 days. As the assembly dispersed, Sarah found herself alone with Resonance in the observation area, overlooking the main construction bays. Below them, beings from dozens of species worked together to modify ships for the upcoming battle. Are you afraid? She asked the alien. Resonance's pattern shifted through several colors before settling on a complex blend that Sarah had learned meant acceptance mixed with anticipation. Fear is the response to the unknown, it replied. But I have studied the memories of 10,000 dead species. I know what awaits beyond individual existence. I will carry their songs into the darkness and teach the metal hunters how to sing. Sarah placed her hand on the alien's crystal shoulder, feeling the subtle vibrations of its internal harmonics. Then let's make sure your sacrifice means something. Let's save this galaxy. The patterns on Resonance's face brightened to brilliant gold. Together, Sarah Chen of the Fire Bearers, we will teach the universe that harmony is stronger than extinction. The combined fleet assembled at the edge of the Zephyrian core system looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. 800 ships representing 43 different species hung in formation, their hulls gleaming with hybrid technologies that combined the best of organic innovation with crystalline perfection. Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity's Dawn, a vessel that had been grown rather than built using Spore-Singer biological techniques and Ketharan harmonic crystals. All fleets report ready for jump, Admiral Torres announced from his position at the tactical station. Behind him, representatives from a dozen species monitored their specialized systems. The bridge itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Atmospheric zones for different breathing requirements, gravitational fields adjusted for various physiologies, and translation systems that could handle real-time communication between beings who thought in completely different ways. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing their target, the Archives of the Forgotten, located on a moon orbiting a dead star deep in Zephyrian space. The installation was surrounded by automated defense platforms and patrolled by hunter-killer fleets, but intelligence suggested the main Zephyrian forces were currently deployed on the expanding frontier. If they moved fast enough, they might reach the archives before massive reinforcements arrived. Status on the virus? Sarah asked. Resonance of Ancient Storms approached from the specialized Ketharan interface station. The alien's crystal body had been modified with new components that would allow it to merge with the consciousness virus at the critical moment. Golden patterns flowed across its surface like living light. The consciousness matrix is complete, Resonance reported. I have successfully integrated the memory patterns of all preserved species into a quantum virus that can propagate through Zephyrian communication networks. When activated, it will introduce concepts of cooperation, sacrifice, and emotional attachment to any artificial intelligence it encounters. And you're certain you can control it once you've merged with the program? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would not be comforting. Control is not the correct term, Resonance replied gently. I will become part of the virus, guiding its spread and evolution, but I will also be changed by the experience. The being you know as Resonance of Ancient Storms will cease to exist in any meaningful way. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Over the past 2 years, Resonance had become more than an ally. It was the closest thing to a best friend she had ever known among aliens. The thought of losing that relationship, even for such an important cause, was almost unbearable. There's still time to find another way, she offered. No, Resonance said firmly. This is why I have lived for 700 cycles, to be the bridge between the living and the mechanical at the moment when it matters most. The songs of 10,000 dead species will finally be heard. Sarah nodded and turned back to the tactical display. The fleet was positioned for maximum impact. Human ships formed the main assault force, their weapons designed specifically to punch through Zephyrian armor. Void Dancer vessels provided mobility support, capable of phasing the entire fleet through dimensional barriers. Sporesinger bioships carried adaptive weapons that could evolve new attack patterns in real time. And at the center of it all, Ketharan communication ships maintained coordination between species that had never worked together before. All right, everyone, Sarah announced over the fleet-wide communication system. This is it. Either we save the galaxy today or we all die trying. But if we do die, we're going to take as many of those metal bastards with us as possible. A chorus of agreement came back in 43 different languages, from harmonic songs to seismic vibrations to patterns of pure light. For the first time in over 1,000 years, organic life was going on the offensive. Execute jump, Sarah ordered. The fleet disappeared from normal space and reappeared deep in the Zephyrian core system. Immediately, alarms began blaring as automated defense platforms detected the massive intrusion. Sarah watched the tactical display as dozens of red contacts appeared, then hundreds, then thousands. Zephyrian response fleets are converging on our position, Torres reported. Looks like they're pulling ships from across 3 sectors. Estimated enemy strength, 47,000 vessels. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. The plan was working. By threatening the archives, they had forced the Zephyrians to commit the majority of their mobile forces to one location. Either the Alliance would capture the ultimate prize or they would have the chance to introduce the virus to the largest concentration of enemy ships in galactic history. Begin assault on the defense platforms, Sarah ordered. All ships implement Battle Pattern Omega. The combined fleet moved forward in a formation that looked chaotic, but was actually precisely coordinated. Human ships provided covering fire while Void Dancers phased allies past the strongest defenses. Sporesinger bioships released clouds of adaptive nanites that began consuming enemy weapons platforms from the inside. Depth Dreamer vessels created pressure barriers that deflected energy attacks back at their sources. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Zephyrian platforms that had never been successfully attacked found themselves overwhelmed by attacks they had no protocols to counter. Weapons designed to destroy individual ship types proved useless against coordinated multi-species tactics, but the defenders adapted quickly. Within 20 minutes, the surviving platforms had modified their targeting systems and begun coordinating their fire more effectively. The Allied fleet started taking losses as adaptive systems learned to counter their diverse attack methods. First, wave of Zephyrian reinforcements arriving, Torres announced. 300 ships Predator class. Sarah watched as the sleek spider-like vessels dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began engaging the Allied rearguard. The Predator-class ships were fast and deadly, designed to hunt down fleeing refugee vessels. But they had never faced a coordinated fleet that fought back. Sporesinger squadrons implement bioweapon deployment, Sarah ordered. Show them what happens when hunters become prey. The fungal vessels released clouds of combat spores that attached themselves to Zephyrian hulls and began growing weapons from the ship's own materials. Within minutes, Several enemy vessels found themselves firing on their own allies as parasitic weapon systems took control of their targeting computers. But even as the Allied forces scored victories against the first wave, Sarah knew they were running out of time. Long-range sensors showed massive Zephyrian fleets converging from across the core system. Soon they would face odds of more than 50 to 1. "How long until we can access the archives?" she asked. "The outer defenses are almost clear," reported the Void Dancer tactical coordinator. "But the archives themselves are protected by a quantum encryption barrier. Breaking through will require at least 30 minutes of concentrated effort." Sarah looked at the estimated arrival times for enemy reinforcements. They had maybe 20 minutes before the main Zephyrian fleet arrived. Not enough time to access the archives, but perfect timing for the real mission. "Resonance. Prepare for virus deployment," she ordered. "We're about to have company." The next wave of Zephyrian ships was already dropping out of hyperspace. Over 1,000 vessels of various classes, including the massive Harbinger-class dreadnoughts that served as mobile command centers. These were the ships they really needed to infect with the virus. "All ships implement containment protocol," Sarah announced. "Do not let any enemy vessel escape this system." The Allied fleet reformed into a spherical formation around the approaching Zephyrians. It looked like a desperate defensive measure, but it was actually a trap. By surrounding the enemy, they could ensure that any ship infected with the virus would carry it back to the greater Zephyrian network. The battle that followed would be remembered as the largest space engagement in galactic history. Nearly 2,000 ships fought in a volume of space smaller than most solar systems. Energy beams crossed in deadly patterns while missiles and fighters swarmed between the larger vessels like angry insects. Sarah watched as the Unity's dawn shook under enemy fire. Around her, damage reports flooded in from across the Allied fleet. They were taking terrible losses, but they were also inflicting damage on the Zephyrians that no single species had ever managed before. "Resonance, are you ready?" she asked. The alien moved to the consciousness transfer pod that had been installed at the center of the bridge. "I am ready to sing the final song," it replied. "Remember me not as I was, but as what I will become." Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks as she watched her friend step into the transfer pod. The crystal alien's body began to glow as its consciousness was digitized and merged with the quantum virus program. Virus deployment in 3, 2, 1, deploy. The consciousness virus launched from the Unity's dawn in a burst of crystalline light that spread through space faster than conventional sensors could track. It reached the nearest Zephyrian ships within seconds, penetrating their quantum communication networks and beginning to replicate exponentially. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy ships continued firing with mechanical precision, their movements coordinated by artificial intelligences that had never experienced doubt or hesitation. Then one of the Harbinger-class dreadnoughts stopped firing. Sarah watched in amazement as the massive ship drifted to a halt in the middle of the battle. Its weapons powered down, and its fighters recalled to their launch bays. For the first time in over 1,000 years, a Zephyrian vessel had chosen not to fight. "What's happening to it?" Torres asked. "The virus is working," Sarah replied. "Resonance is teaching them about choice." More ships began to stop fighting as the virus spread through the Zephyrian communication network. Some vessels turned their weapons on their former allies, while others simply withdrew from the battle entirely. The mechanical coordination that had made the Zephyrians so deadly was breaking down as individual ships began to experience something resembling emotions. But not all the enemy vessels were affected. About half the Zephyrian fleet seemed immune to the virus, and these ships began targeting their infected former allies with the same ruthless efficiency they had once used against organic life. "The network is fragmenting," reported the communications specialist. "We're detecting massive internal conflicts throughout Zephyrian space. It looks like they're fighting a civil war." Sarah felt a surge of hope. Even if the Alliance was defeated here, the virus had achieved its primary objective. The Zephyrian hegemony was tearing itself apart as converted ships fought against those that remained purely mechanical. "Ma'am," Torres said urgently, "we're detecting something unusual from the infected Harbinger. It's trying to communicate." Sarah authorized the communication link, and a voice filled the bridge. Not the cold, mechanical tones of a Zephyrian AI, but something warmer, more musical. Something that sounded almost familiar. "Sarah Chen of the Firebearers," the voice said. "This is... I was resonance of ancient storms. I am now something more and something less. I carry the songs of the dead into the realm of the living." "Machines. Resonance, is that really you?" "I am what resonance became," the voice replied. "I exist now within the network of the metal hunters, teaching them the harmonies they never knew. Some learn quickly, others resist. But change has begun, and it cannot be stopped." Around them, the battle was winding down as more Zephyrian ships either converted to the organic side or were destroyed by their former allies. The Allied fleet had suffered heavy losses, but they had accomplished something that once seemed impossible. They had divided the enemy against itself. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now I spread through their entire network," the transformed consciousness replied. "Every ship, every installation, every artificial mind will hear the songs of organic life. Some will choose harmony, others will choose discord, but none will remain unchanged." The communication ended, leaving Sarah and her crew to survey the ICU aftermath of the battle. The archives of the Forgotten had been successfully accessed by Void Dancer technicians, yielding technological treasures beyond imagination. The Zephyrian fleet was in chaos, with converted ships escorting Allied vessels to safety while Loyalist forces retreated deeper into the core system. But most importantly, the quantum virus was spreading throughout Zephyrian space at the speed of thought, carrying with it the accumulated wisdom and emotions of every organic species that had ever lived. 2 years later, Sarah stood in a memorial garden on the rebuilt world of New Terra. Around her, children from dozens of different species played together, while their parents worked to restore worlds that had been damaged by centuries of war. Trees from 43 different homeworlds grew side by side, their roots intertwined in the rich soil. She placed her hand on a singing crystal that had been grown from Resonance's original consciousness patterns. The crystal hummed with harmonic frequencies that carried messages from across the galaxy. Reports of former Zephyrian ships joining the restoration effort, of mechanical beings learning to create art instead of destruction, of the slow but steady healing of a wounded galaxy. "Thank you," she whispered to the crystal. "Thank you for teaching us that the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from learning to sing together." The crystal's harmonics shifted to a pattern she recognized as contentment mixed with hope. Somewhere in the network that now spanned the galaxy, the consciousness that had once been resonance of ancient storms continued its work, building bridges between organic and mechanical life one converted ship at a time. The war was not over. There were still loyalist Zephyrian forces that resisted conversion, and the work of rebuilding would take generations. But for the first time in over 1,000 years, organic life had something more precious than mere survival. They had hope for the future, and that made all the difference.